New Beginnings is made possible by the generosity of our sponsors. Hello everyone. Every day is a good day for a new beginning. I am your host, Betsy Carolina. Today's show is about family domestic violence and how it affects the entire family, especially the children who oftentimes are the silent victims. According to a study by the American Journal of Surgery, domestic violence has become increasingly recognized as a public health problem and was declared a national epidemic in 1992. In the United States, 1 to 2 million women yearly suffer injuries due to domestic violence, and 30 to 50% of female homicides are committed by a present or former partner. The majority of these murder victims had either been seen in emergency rooms for prior domestic violence-related injuries or had reported these injuries to the police. It is estimated that 50% of all acute injuries and 21% of all injuries in women requiring urgent surgery are the result of partner abuse. We are about to hear Laverne's story. She is a child witness and survivor of domestic violence who was able to get out of an abusive relationship and found the strength to have a new beginning in life, to help bring awareness to the issue of domestic violence and to help victims understand the cycles and how to get help. Laverne is the president and founder of Love Life Now Foundation. This is her story.
I come to this work as a survivor of domestic violence and also a child witness to it. Domestic violence was rampant in our home. My father brutally abused my mother for the span of their marriage, and he didn't hide to do it from us. It was something that was commonplace in a lot of households where we lived. There were many days that he would come home very upset about something or something that might have tripped him off at work and take it out on her. He was a very jealous and paranoid person. So, probably once every week, sometimes twice a week, sometimes 2 times a month. You just didn't know when it was going to happen. So not only her, but, we all walked on eggshells living in the house. And so when he did it, it was in brutal forms. So beer bottles that he would break and stab her with, and machetes that he would use on her from time to time. So very gruesome stuff that...
Can you, and I know you, thank you for all sharing this very personal, and yes, like you said, seems like violent.
Yeah, very violent.
How old were you when you remember these things
I
happening?
think the earliest memory I have was about 6 or 7 years old. And I remember feeling very helpless. I remember my siblings watching. We were very helpless to what he was doing. He was the sole breadwinner. My mother barely had an elementary school education. And so even if it was the fact, now this is the 80s, even if the police were called, when they showed up, it was deemed a husband and wife thing.
Yes, and was this here in the States?
This was in Trinidad.
In Trinidad.
In Trinidad. And so I don't even think the term domestic violence was coined at that time.
Okay.
And so my mother, again, he was articulate, he was charming, he was clever. He worked for the Department of Labor at the time. And, when he put on his clothes and went to work, when he left the house, he was a different person. But respectful, well-known, well-liked amongst his peers. But he was a monster inside the house many, many times.
Was the abuse physical and verbal?
Both.
Emotional abuse, verbal.
And physical, very physical. And so my mother, God bless her heart, she had said, many years later, that she had stayed because who was going to take care, how was she going to take care of 5 children on her own?
Is there a particular event that took place, either with your mother, your siblings, or yourself, when the abuse happened that you still remember up until this day?
Oh, I think every attack that I was privy to that he bestowed upon her, I remember. By the time I was 15, he wanted me to come out here by myself to live with my grandparents. He saw potential in me that he really wanted to nurture. So he sent me to the States, and this is 1993 now, to finish high school. I did, on a student visa. And by the time I had graduated in 96, I had to go back to Trinidad to finish to get my permanent residency, to come back to the States. And so I went back, and at that time now, so all the kids are, for the most part, grown, and none of us were standing for him putting his hands on her, right? So the tables had somewhat turned. By 1998, 2 years my permanent residency took for it to come into play. He had decided to let her go. This is now 25 plus years of marriage, filled and ridden with abuse. And I will tell you, Betsy, there were times when I was little that I would ask myself, because he would do it in the house, he would do it in front of in the street where we lived, in front of our neighbors, and sometimes people would come out and look. And I would say to myself, why aren't the men that are looking, why aren't they helping?
That was going to be my next question. What was the reaction? Did anyone help? Did anyone come to your rescue, to your mom's rescue?
For the most part, no. And so it wasn't until later down that I understood, as a grown-up, getting involved in this work, why. So there's such a thing called the bystander approach, right? And so they looking on, for the most part, right, they did the same thing in their house to their wives or girlfriends. So who were they to come tell him what to do in his house? The other thing is, well, if I jump in, what's going to happen to me? Right? And then the other idea is, well, she stays, so she must like it. I'm just going to leave it be. It's not my business. And didn't understand that at the time, but as a child, you feel helpless. And so coming back to 1998 now, he allowed my mom to finally leave and come to the States with us, because her permanent residency had come through as well. And so her, myself, and my two youngest brothers now migrated to live with my grandparents. He stayed behind. And they were still married, and he had now wanted to move on with another woman. You know, she started working at a hospital in the kitchen and, you know, trying to really build herself up. I did the same. I came back from the States. I was now 2 years behind my peers, but I started going to Suffolk University at nights and working an entry-level job in corporate America. I met this guy who worked in the customer service department. And there were times I would go up to that floor to bring, you know, paperwork or messages or whatever. And he would, you know, try to get my attention, which eventually he did. He was 10 years my senior, and I thought it really flattering that a guy older than me took such notice in me, and was really smitten with him, and we ended up dating. We started dating. Things were great for about 3 months until the first time a physical attack happened. This particular day, I had started suffering with allergies, which I still do. And I thought it was a major cold that I was coming down with. So I called the office and I said, hey, I'm not coming in today. And they said, you know, go ahead, take care of yourself. We'll see you tomorrow. And didn't think anything of it, went to bed. And then my phone rang, my cell phone rang, and it was him. And he was very upset and asked why I wasn't at my desk, because he had tried me there and I didn't answer. And I said, you know, I'm really sick. Are you going to come bring me some chicken soup? And he said, chicken soup? And he hung up the phone. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, that was weird. Hung up the phone, went back to bed. In about 15 minutes, he was at my house. And
was this a normal response for him? Was this his usual way of dating you? No,
this was 3 months into the relationship, and he had taken me on lavish dates, bought me flowers, opened my car door, all these things that I was not accustomed to in a relationship. Everybody else had gone to work in the house. We lived in a 3-family in Dorchester at the time. And, you know, it was just me there on the first floor. And so he barged past me and went straight to my bedroom where I lived and started rummaging through my closet, under my bed, behind the curtain, looking for something. I couldn't tell. And he said, who was here? And I said, what do you mean, who was here? somebody was here. That's why you stayed home, didn't you? And I said, no. So this paranoid behavior continued for about 3-5 minutes. And I sat at the edge of the bed watching him just destroy everything, sort of order in my bedroom.
What was your first reaction to that?
I was scared.
Were you scared?
I was scared.
Did you have flashbacks of your childhood?
No,
Did
because
you think it would escalate?
I didn't think that it. First of all, I'm very confused because I'm wondering, how did the phone call that we had just 15 minutes ago translate to this? And as he continued, I got more and more scared. And so I said to him, what is wrong with you? I said, you need to calm down. You're scaring me. And that resulted in him coming up to me. I'm sitting at the edge of the bed and him looking down on me and then slapped me because he said, I knew you were too good to be true. Slapped me so hard, I saw stars and stormed out. And so I'm left wondering, what did I do? I'm crying. Tears are running down my face. My face is hurt. And I'm thinking, what could I have done to prevent this?
Yes.
And then I caught myself and I said, you know what? No, I didn't do anything. I didn't deserve this. We don't have any kids together. We're not married. I'm done. 21 years old. Good. I'm thinking I have a handle on this. This is it. I am over. That weekend I was supposed to take a one-day bus shopping trip to New York. When I came back to Boston, I walked in and it was 24 purple roses, my favorite color. And there was a card attached to it saying, I miss you, I love you, I'm sorry, call me. And I read that and I'm not gonna lie, my heart melted.
And what was your reaction?
I began
to his phone call and to the flowers?
Yeah, I began to rationalize why it would be okay to take the apologies. Okay. I began to rationalize why he did what he did. I began to rationalize the fact that in my mind, it was not as bad as what my mom had went through. And it was only one time. And the elaborate apology meant to me and then that he had taken time to think about what he had done. And I was convinced in that moment that he would not do it again.
Did it happen again?
That translated into almost 2 years of abuse.
And now as an adult, you're experiencing this and you're in the moment and you're experiencing the abuse, but you're still in some way not recognizing or overlooking the signs, the red flags.
Absolutely.
And why do you think that happens and what got you out of it?
Right. And so, in this moment, you're telling yourself, you're equating, right? It's not as bad. I am not her, right? And he is not him.
Yes.
Even though I had gravitated, now I look back, to who he was in this man.
Yes.
I relatively saw my father in him and subconsciously didn't know it. And so people tend to ask, how do women fall into these types of relationships? How does anybody fall into these types of relationships and stay? And I'm here to tell you that a big part of it, at least for me, in the beginning, was the idea of being blamed for letting myself fall into it. The idea of shame.
Sure.
I am in corporate America. I am a student at a university, and my family also know what my mother went through. So the idea of any of that or any person from those three sectors coming back and saying, how could you let yourself fall into this, even though you know what your mother went through?
Right.
So that kept me, silent, not wanting to share it with anybody out of shame and out of guilt. Now, the second part is the person that loves you is saying to you, you made this happen. And in a crazy, warped mindset, you start to believe it.
Okay.
You're hearing this over and over again. And you start to second guess yourself. And that's exactly what I did between the 2 times that it happened.
But you said between the 2 times that it happened.
Between
you
the
mean
first and the second
physical
time,
abuse,
yes.
But in between, you had all the other kinds of abuse.
Yes, the verbal, the checking up on. So the major red
Control.
flag that I had missed in the beginning, which was a sign of him trying to take power and control, which he ended up having, was him calling me every single morning, at least 5 times before I got to work.
Did you think that was love? Did you think that was him caring for you?
I thought, wow,
he's so in love with me.
He cares. I had never had this much attention in any relationship. So I was flattered,
Yes.
not knowing that this was him checking up on me, making sure he knew where I was at all times.
So I want to move on because you had your new beginning.
Yeah.
You moved on from this relationship and from what you experienced, and you had your moment where you
had an epiphany that I had to leave.
You did.
So
and you started. I would like for you to walk us through. So what happened in your life briefly that got you to that next step, that motivated you to wake up? This is
I gotta get out. Right.
You gotta get out.
Right.
And what did you do, and how did you start
Absolutely.
the Love Life Now Foundation?
Absolutely. This particular night, he was irate. He walked through the door, started rummaging through books. By now, I'm living in a studio apartment. He started rummaging through these books, everything in the apartment. Who was here? The typical. Nobody was here. I love you. It's me and you and me and only you. And by now, also isolated from my family and friends. He had made me to believe that they didn't understand our relationship. I began to believe that they didn't understand our relationship, and I totally did not divulge the extent of what was happening. They did not know about the physical, and they did not know how heightened the emotional and verbal abuse had become. That being said, this particular night, he comes in and he's rummaging through books, and he bucks upon a novel called Waiting to Exhale, which, as we know, turned into a movie by Terry McMillan. And this particular book was given to me by my aunt when I had moved to the States, when at the time I was in a long-distance relationship. And so he comes through these books, and a picture pops out, and he picks it up and he looks at it, and he becomes so beet red in the face, much more beet red than I had ever seen. And he looks at the picture and he flings it at me, and I saw the picture in my heart. I died inside, Betsy, because it was a picture of my ex-boyfriend and I, the long-distance relationship. Him and I hugged up on the beach, on the sand, from Trinidad.
Were you scared?
I
scared
died.
for your life at that moment?
I was so scared. He left. He went into the kitchen, and for the first time, he grabbed a knife. The first time, he grabbed a weapon. And so he came back in the room, and he said, "I'm going to kill you tonight." He said, "If you've been making a fool of me," he said, "what are you doing? Having a long distance thing with this guy? Are you sending money to this guy? Are you making fun about me with this guy?" And the more I tried to appease him, that this was so far beyond what he was thinking, it made him more irate.
Are you thinking, I gotta get out of here right now? Are you thinking, I can handle him?
No, I'm thinking I'm dead. My studio apartment is very small. There was only so many corners that I could run. I was on my day bed, which is yay big.
Right.
And he straddled me on the bed and pressed the knife up against my neck to let me know that he could slit my throat at any time. And he started yelling profanities. At one point, he put the knife down and started punching me. From the first attack that he had bestowed upon me with the slap, he had never hit me in my face again. I think he knew that I worked and went to school amongst people that could see bruises.
Yes.
So the brunt of the attacks always was up the upper torso and upper hip area. But this particular night, he went for my face and started punching me, spitting in my face, yelling profanities, getting up, pacing back and forth. And he would straddle me again, punch me, strangle me, put the knife again. And this started from 9 o'clock the night before and went to 2 o'clock the next morning. So he stopped at 2 o'clock, and I went to bed in my bed. At that point, maybe a couple hours later, I had to get myself to the hospital because I felt the sharpest pain that I had ever felt.
Yeah.
I got myself into a cab in the ER and told the driver to take me to the ER.
How were you able to get out? Did he
I quietly left. But he then followed the cab that I was in and started drag racing, yelling for me to get out. By the time he said that saw that I pulled into the hospital, he drove away. Because in his mind, now later I understand that I was going to seek help. I was going to speak up for the first time.
Yes.
In the ER, the doctor said to me, "Who did this to you?" Because I had lied and said that I had fell in the shower. And help to me, Betsy, meant getting the police involved, getting my school involved. So I lied. And I said, nobody. He said, I can get you help. And help also meant to me going to a shelter with a big open room with beds with a bunch of women that I did not know. And I absolutely didn't want that. I didn't want to be shamed. I didn't want to face the unknown. And when we talk about the work that I do now, Love Life Now Foundation was formed 10 years later after I took part in 2 beauty pageants that I ended up winning locally and nationally, and wanted to further this work. I ended up taking part in a volunteer training at a local shelter 10 years later. And that's when I knew that I really wanted to continue this work. So the year for the titles were up, and Love Life Now was formed the year after. But I wanted to further the work of awareness so that folks understood that there are resources everywhere, that there's help everywhere, and that there is, shelters aren't what we think it is. We have this myth about what it entails, that it only offers shelter. But agencies that do this frontline work every day provide legal counseling, advocacy in court with you. If you need to go file a restraining order, there are advocates that can come with you. They provide one-on-one counseling, whether it's group or one-on-one for yourself, you and your children. So when we talk about the resources that are out there are a plethora of them. And people don't know that they exist until they get to a police station or an emergency room like I was. And we don't want that to be the case. So we're an awareness arm that puts on these events throughout the year that get people out and about talking about the issue, because we want folks to know, want folks to be in the know beforehand, as opposed to when they get to or are involved in a situation.
So I want to just bring awareness that women are in the majority
90%
of the time
are the victims. But the other 10%.
The other 10%, we can't leave them out.
Men, women, children, and the elders. So 1 in every 4 women will be abused in their lifetime. That's a fact. So that's me, you, and 2 other women that could be sitting in the room. The problem with it is that we're not speaking up. So if we're talking about the 1 in every 7 men that actually go through this as well, think about how much harder it is for them to come out and speak. I mean, I've had people call me up and say, they called the police station and were laughed at because they said that they don't want to do anything to their spouses, but the abuse is getting out of hand. Can someone come? And they were laughed at. And this was years ago. It's gotten better.
And the abuse for men, is it mostly physical, financial?
It can get, the abuse that we experience as women, it can be the same for men.
Love Life Now Foundation was based and was born out of sort of the experiences that you had in life, and you wanting to bring awareness about domestic violence, using what happened to you to help others.
Absolutely. And pain into purpose.
Exactly. Yeah. And that was your new beginning, and that is that's what motivated you. But we only have a few more minutes, but I love to talk about the types of abuse and the type of resources. You just mentioned some, but I know there are some resources at your local level, at the state level, at the federal level. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So people think when they hear domestic violence, they think of the physical. They think that somebody has been slapped or kicked or punched, and that is absolutely not the only type of abuse. There is verbal abuse, obviously the put downs, the constant put downs, the insults, the chastising, and then there's the emotional, making you think you're crazy, right, when you're not, the psychological piece of it.
Gaslighting?
Yeah, gaslighting, right.
Can you talk about what gaslighting, that's sort of like a new term that a lot of people probably are not familiar with.
Absolutely.
What is gaslighting?
So it is a combination of put downs combined with the emotional. So egging you to the point of making you want to say something so that they in turn can then react to what what you just portrayed. So exert that power and control that they know they have over you, because they know once if they hit you, they've hit you before, they strangled you before, you've done nothing. They know that they can continue to up the ante, right?
What about the financial?
Oh, financial. So we talk about a lot of the reasons why women stay, why victims stay in these types of relationships.
I know you have an event that's
Yeah.
mother-daughter high tea and financial planning.
Yeah.
And why is this important
Absolutely.
to have the financial planning?
Absolutely. So we talk about, being, my father being the sole breadwinner in that relationship. And for a lot of victims, not just women, but for a lot of victims, finances are held over their head, right? And so we don't think it's ever too early for just the everyday woman to get a hold of their finances and know what's going on in that relationship, because that's one of the things that your abuser can hold over your head. If you try to leave, I will freeze the account. If you try to leave, you'll have no money to take care of our child. If you try to leave, well, guess what? The insurance money, I'm the beneficiary. I'll get all of it. All of these things that we don't necessarily take the time to think about because we're so busy with day-to-day life. Why not come and hear the ways that you can make your money work for you now, not just now, but in the long run, and get a hold of what, it means to be in control of your money, right? Mm-hmm. Even if you have a joint account with your abuser, there are ways that you can set something aside or begin to plan for your future on a dime, right? It sounds crazy, but you can.
So what role can men play, society in general? You just had this event,
the White Ribbon Night Gala.
This was to encourage more men to speak up about domestic violence and to take an active role. Yes.
Yeah, and so
in the prevention.
So the White Ribbon Night Gala is patterned after the White Ribbon Campaign, which asks more men to speak up nationwide about the issue of domestic violence. And the event itself asks men to come out and again, play an active role in being not just, a preventer, but what is your role as a bystander? If you see something, say something. This is everybody's business. And the men in your life, whether it's your sons or your nephews, your colleagues, you have a responsibility that if you are at the barbershop and you hear something being said about a relationship that your colleague or your friend is involved in, that they have to stop. It is not okay and acceptable to sit around and condone that type of behavior amongst any one of you.
Thank you so much for the kind of work that you're doing. Thank you for being here today.
Absolutely.
And I'm just going to ask you to give a final message to both victims or survivors of domestic violence.
I will implore you to understand that you are not alone. This issue affects everyone. If you or someone you know are going through an abusive relationship, I know there are resources throughout the nation, but you can call 1-800-799-SAFE. That is 1-800-799-SAFE. That is the National Domestic Violence Hotline number. You can call, get in touch with an advocate in your area so that they can begin to help you figure out how you can safety plan to get out of the situation that you're in now, whether it's verbal, physical, or emotional. Please reach out for help. When you begin to speak up, your abuser loses power and control.
Domestic violence is a serious health issue, and it pertains to all of us as a society. We all should take an active part in spreading the message that domestic violence is not to be tolerated. If you are in any kind of abusive relationship, please know that there are resources available to you, and get out, tell someone, and ask for help. If you are the abuser and recognize that you have a problem, please stop and seek help. That doesn't make you weaker, it actually makes you a stronger person. Please remember to take care of yourself so you can take care of others, and be kind to one another. Until next time, God bless you. New Beginnings is made possible by the generosity of our sponsors.